Welcome back to Your Creativity, everybody. This is Dylan once again on a Zoom call. This time we're going to the East Coast again. It's been a little while since we've talked to somebody on the East Coast. We are talking to Robert Duncan McNeill, who's in Atlanta. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Weather's
Awesome.
decent here. Um, the writing's not crazy. Everything's
Yeah.
kind of mellowed out here.
Where are you at again?
Salt
Where?
Lake City.
Yeah, I love Salt Lake. I used to have a place up at Park City, condo up there. I love skiing and just summers up there were great. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Utah's beautiful.
Utah's amazing, and Park City is amazing. That much beauty that close. It's just
Yeah.
love it. How are things down in Atlanta? Have things calmed down there quite a bit?
I think that it's funny, like when you see the news and you see the police all geared up like, the military, some invading force, and you see the protesters on camera. But if those cameras pan right or left, even a little bit, you realize, oh, there's like maybe 1,000 people there. Like it's not, this, the, what was that called? The spring, the spring in the Middle East. What was that called? The something spring, when there were millions of people out on the streets. Like
Right.
literally, you looked in Egypt or Yemen or some of those countries, and there were literally millions of people. This is significant, and I think there's it's these protests around the country certainly show that there is something resonating for people, but it's not in the millions of people. So
Right.
anyway, I live in the suburbs of Atlanta. It's very quiet where I'm at. I'm very grateful for that. I think our mayor has done a phenomenal job of kind of riding the waves of this whole thing, and she's very committed to some serious reform of the police in terms of training and policies, and adopting policies that will help protect everyone. So yeah, I think things are. I think these protests have been effective. I think the rioting has been relatively minimal here. Although I did know someone who was sort of got swept up into the rioting downtown the very first night of that ugliness, which in my opinion has nothing to do with the protests, which are very peaceful and very righteous in my opinion, and very valid and very legal. Like it's our First Amendment speaks of
Exactly.
it. So I think the protests have nothing to do with this criminal behavior, this rioting and looting. And a friend of mine, a colleague that I worked with here on a TV show that I produced in Atlanta, who works in the location business, represents people, building owners and business owners and landlords that rent out their buildings for filming. He represents a lot of people in a kind of older neighborhood downtown Atlanta, and he was down there helping some Black business owners board up their store. It was actually, I think it was some African American women owned like a beauty supply store, and he was boarding it up to protect it, and a car stopped, and a bunch of young men got out and beat him very, very seriously, hurt him. And it's a shame because I know him, and he's a good man, and he's committed to that part of the city and to redevelopment and protecting business owners and people's property. And he also has a daughter who's married to an African American man. His grandchildren are mixed race. He's an ally of the protests. So these rioters and these people that beat him up they have nothing to do with the protests. They're just angry, lost people that are breaking the law and
Yeah.
hurting people. So anyway, politics.
Yeah, here it was just a crazy few, but like your mayor, she's done a good job of. We had curfews that they ended yesterday because things have calmed down.
Yeah,
So it's amazing that we have good leaders that can, get a handle on it.
yeah, yeah.
Let's go on to something brighter.
Yeah,
Something
let's talk about creative things.
exactly. So
Mhm.
I became aware of you on The Next Generation, Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yep.
When you were in the episode, the name?
The First Duty, it was.
First Duty.
The
And it
First
was
Duty. Yep.
Will Wheaton,
Mm-hmm.
Wesley Crusher was back on Earth, and you were one of the other people in the episode. What was it like filming that episode? Because that was your first kind of entry into Star Trek.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I hadn't watched Next Gen when it was on the air, and I didn't know much about it. My agents at the time told me they had a bunch of clients who had done it before, and that their clients always had a wonderful experience. Like, it was one of those shows that just had a really good reputation for the experience that the actors had on the show. So I went into it kind of anticipating having a good time. I had no idea. I didn't realize that Wesley's character had been off the show, and I didn't know, the context and the history of that for Will. So it's funny. I remember Will saying, as we were doing these scenes, it was, myself and a few other young actors that were closer to Will's age. And he kept saying, God, I was begging them to have some actors my age for years. And now finally, you don't realize how nice this is to be doing an episode of Star Trek where I'm not acting with all the adults. And he just kept repeating that a lot. We had a great time. The whole little ensemble of the younger actors, the Starfleet Academy team that we were all portraying, we got along great. We would go to lunch together every day, and between setups, lighting setups, we would sit off to the side and just chat away and talk. And Will and I stayed in touch for quite a few years after that. Even when I was out of town or things like that, I'd touch base with him every now and then, because I just really sort of connected and bonded with him and just had such a nice time. I wanted to stay in touch with him. So overall it was a great experience.
And what I liked about that episode, it was that change of pace where it was a group of younger Starfleet people, and I and your character is similar to your Tom Paris character on Voyager. Would you say there are similarities, because they're both kind of
very, very similar? I mean, they both had got in trouble in their past. The differences, I'd say, is for me, is that I always felt like Nick Locarno on Next Gen, he appeared like a really nice, good guy and sincere and all that, but underneath he was a little bit rotten. I mean, in the end, he took the fall and he did step up in the very end, but he presented being a really good guy, and underneath I don't think he was as good as he presented. Whereas Tom Paris presented to everyone that he was a jerk. He sort of was like, all right, I'm going to call me a jerk. Fine. Great. I'm a jerk. He sort of owned it and presented it as a badge of honor, when I think really underneath, and what was fun to discover with him, really underneath, he was a good guy. And he grew into a much more heroic sort of an honorable man. And he started on the show very much still very immature and kind of a bit of still stuck in his boyhood in many ways. So that was fun. It was a fun character to play.
Yeah, I thought his character was one of the stronger characters on the show, because he had development all the way through.
Yeah, I agree.
And
he definitely evolved, and and I felt like he was able to complement a lot of different other characters nicely. You could put him in a scene with the Doctor, and there was something interesting about that odd couple. You could put him in a scene with the Captain. You could put him in a scene with Harry or B'Elanna, Kes, Neelix. Yeah.
And speaking of Harry, we've had Garrett on the podcast before. He came to Star Trek.
Nice.
He came to a convention here. Well, the first time I saw him, it was years ago. It was a Star Trek convention here in Salt Lake. But he came to FanX, and I got to meet him in person and do an interview at the table. And he's super nice and just a great guy. And you had years of experience, and you're interacting with him now. Tell us about your friendship with him.
Yeah, Garrett and I sort of bonded in a number of ways. We shot the very first scene of the pilot. We were the very first thing to, I think, the very first scene that was shot on Caretaker, the pilot, was the scene at Quark's bar, where Harry comes into Quark's bar and Quark is gonna, hustle him with some stones or something, some jewels, and then Tom Paris walks in and says and has his back, so they bond immediately. So I felt like Garrett and I from the beginning were the early birds on the pilot. We shot that scene, was the very first scene that was shot on the pilot, and then I think that first week or so, it was a lot of me and Garrett in the mess hall and on the bridge with Geneviève Bujold, and he and I were working in those early days. We were working together quite a lot, and we were always together. So I think we just sort of naturally bonded because of that way that was scheduled and the way that pilot was written. He was close to my age, a few years younger, but I think he always felt like we were contemporaries, and more contemporary certainly than Garrett and Kate or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have chats, and we just have a good friendship and a good sense of humor with each other, and it all started from the very beginning. I think that's one reason to kind of segue into the podcast that you mentioned. Garrett and I are doing a podcast called The Delta Flyers, and it's a free podcast wherever you get your podcast. It's a rewatch of all the episodes of Voyager. We rewatch them, and then we come on the podcast and talk about what we remember and what was brought to mind by the rewatch together. And then there's a video component on Patreon and more bonus features if people want to get involved. Anyway, the reason that all came up was because Garrett and I have always had a good banter and a good sense of humor together from the beginning. We've had a good friendship.
Yeah.
So when this quarantine and pandemic started, Garrett was like, I've always wanted to do something with you and I, and like our sense of humor and our chemistry as friends. And maybe we could do something. And so it just by circumstance, we said, well, let's give it a shot. And it's really been fun. It's been so much fun for me to get to talk to him on a regular basis and kind of rebuild and reconnect our friendship after all these years. And also it's been so much fun to rewatch these episodes, because a lot of them I may have seen on the air originally. Some of them I'm sure I didn't. I was probably filming and missed quite a number of them. So it's really fun to go back and watch and really take the time to sort of reflect on every single episode starting from the beginning. And doing it with Garrett's really fun.
How far are you guys in right now?
We've rewatched and I think we've aired about 6 or so, 5 or 6 episodes with the pilot and everything. And we just watched, I think, episode 9 the other day. So we have to stay a few episodes ahead so that we can have time to edit them and things like that. So
right.
We're trying to, keep a few episodes ahead for sure.
And of those ones that you've done so far, is there any cool stories that you guys remember? If you could share like a quick one with us.
God, there's so many stories. I mean,
years.
a lot of stories. Just going back to the pilot, like I had forgotten Neelix's character had been very different in the pilot. He was dressed in this really cool, like fur coat. He looked like he was a junk man. He looked like a trapper. He looked like Han Solo or something. He had this cool leather fur jacket that went to the ground, and it was like dark colors. It wasn't those pinks and oranges that he ended up wearing, golds and things. I had forgotten that Neelix really was the one that pulled the action sequence out of his pocket on with the Kazon there to save Kess and get her, rescue Kess and to save us. Like, that's something that just I had totally forgotten. And I remembered filming those scenes out in the dry lake bed out in near Victorville, California. We filmed on a dry lake bed where they film a lot of car commercials, and it's epic. It's beautiful, and climbing out of a hole that we dug into the ground there, as if we were coming, from deep in the planet. The set they built for the Kazon out there, the fact that our director of photography, our cameraman, his hobby was flying a helicopter, and he used to fly his helicopter out there to set each day, while the rest of us had to stay at these crappy little motels in Victorville. But since he had his own helicopter, he would land out in the desert, and then he'd take off and fly over the mountain. He'd be home in 40 minutes. And the rest of us, had to drive in a van back to Victorville and stay at the Days Inn or something. It was things like that. So,
with the color TVs in the hotel room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have so many stories that we're remembering. Both of us are remembering different things and kind of jogging each other's memories. And yeah, we've interviewed a bunch of people, had some guests on, and Robert Beltran, Picardo, and Kate Mulgrew is going to come on soon. And we've had Dan Curry from visual effects, behind the scenes people. It's been a lot of fun. The podcast, I mean, you're doing a podcast, it's a lot of fun.
It is.
To kind of have the time and the format to kind of dig into things deeply. And yeah.
So I introduced you as Robert, but you actually are referred to as Robbie, in the community and among your castmates, because there were 3 Roberts on Voyager. Yeah. So tell us, so you all came in as Robert, and how did you guys decide who got,
Well, I think we actually, honestly, it just we lucked out that we all went by different nicknames. So I had always gone by Robbie, even though my professional credit has been Robert for years. Since I was a kid, I've always gone by Robbie, and I've kept that name. So when I, with friends or colleagues and things like that, I always go by Robbie. And so that was helpful. And Robert Picardo has gone by Bob for many years. I don't know how long, maybe his whole life. So he was already used to going by Bob, and Robert Beltran uses Robert, the full name. So we lucked out. So it was easy for us to fall into that. And once people knew that, it was, there was no confusion. But sometimes we'd get like guest directors or guest star actors that really didn't know everybody. And they would, they would want to speak to me. A guest director might say to me, Robert, can you blah, 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 blah. And I would ignore it because I thought he was talking to Beltran, and so yeah, there was some confusion with people that were not full-time crew members, but usually everybody from the beginning, once they knew our nicknames and were working with us, it wasn't a problem.
So you mentioned guest directors. That's a good, I think, way to talk about. Yeah. You directed a few times on Voyager and on Enterprise, 4 episodes each, right?
That sounds right. I think it's been 25 years.
Yeah.
20 or 25, but I think so. I certainly remember my first episode of Voyager, A Sacred Ground. I was petrified to. I'd been wanting to direct for a long time, and I directed a couple of little short films as projects, but nothing close to an episode of television, certainly not a big sci-fi show. So I was petrified and excited and exhausted when it was over. Sacred Ground I was very proud of that, very happy with it. Kate Mulgrew was very supportive. She had a big story in that episode, and I was happy to be directing that episode. That Kate, she and I always had a great relationship. So that was a lot of fun. And once I started directing, once it was over and I saw the finished product, I was hooked. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And I thought that's what I would want to do, but you never know until you try something.
Exactly.
So yeah, directed about one a year after that, season 3, 4, 5. I might have skipped one season. Once I directed, a lot of other actors came out interested in directing, and I think Rick Berman and the producers wanted to slow it down a bit. So I felt very grateful to get 4 episodes. I know Bob did 1 or 2. I think he might have done 2. Tim Russ directed 1. Roxanne directed 1. Roxanne's gone on to a very big directing career. Who else? Andy Robinson came over from DS9 and directed 1. Our director of photography, Marvin Rush, directed 1 or 2. Yeah, a lot of people, in the family ended up getting opportunities to direct, and I'll always be grateful to Star Trek for that they were always a show that was willing to take a chance on, members of the family inside, the people that worked full-time on the show, and give them a shot at their dreams, and if they were good at it, to reward that. So I was very grateful. Yeah.
Great. And from what I understand, I heard the story that like when you first started on the show, you expressed to the producers that you would like to direct at some point.
Day one, I actually expressed because I had started shadowing or observing directors about 2 or 3 years before that on another series that I had done that didn't last quite a full season. And I had really gotten interested. So I had been shadowing and observing directors and kind of watching and learning for 2 or 3 years. And I'd done a couple of series in that 2 or 3 years that didn't last, that got canceled after 7 episodes or got canceled after, 15 episodes or whatever. So when I got on Star Trek, I knew that there was a good chance this show was going to run more than 7 episodes or 15 episodes.
Yeah.
So I wanted them to know right out of the gate, I'm interested in directing. You tell me what I need to do to have the opportunity, because I'm excited to do it, and I've already been getting ready. I wanted him to know that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and you've went on to direct on other series as well, Chuck and what's the other one? Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. And you also directed an episode of Everwood here. And that was
Salt Lake. Yeah,
Salt Lake.
That's right.
Yeah. Before you go into Chuck, tell us a little bit about Everwood, what your experience here.
Everwood was interesting. So I was relatively new as a full-time director at that point. I had directed, I think, 1 season of Dawson's Creek, where I was a guest director, maybe just an episode or 2. And Greg Berlanti, who had been involved in Dawson's Creek that year before, had seen my episode of Dawson's Creek, the funeral episode, that he was very impressed by. And so he wanted me to do one of the early episodes of Everwood. That show that Greg Berlanti's first show he created was called Everwood, and shot in Salt Lake. Anyway, I was doing one of the early episodes, episode 5 or 6 or something like that. And my memories of that, I definitely learned a lot on that particular episode about how to deal with actor challenges. There was one actor on that show, and I'll not use any names because I don't think that's respectful. But there was an actor who for the first time since I had been directing, and I'd only directed 4 episodes of Voyager and a couple of Enterprise and a couple of, I don't think I'd even directed 10 episodes of television at that point. So very early. I mean, at this point, I've directed 100, 150 episodes. I've produced as many or more. I've been involved in 5, 6, 800. I don't even know how many episodes of television. But at that point, I'd only directed maybe 7 or 8 episodes. And it was the first time I had an actor, a principal actor, who was very difficult, and creatively wanted to do some things that I knew the writers did not want.
All right.
The writers had been very specific about what they wanted, and the network and all of our meetings, we had been very specific about what they wanted, in particularly one scene, and this actor just refused to do it, and then spoke very disrespectfully to me and stormed off the set. It was very dramatic, and I didn't, you know, I'm somebody who avoided conflict most of my life, but at this point, if this happened to me now, I would deal with this very differently. I would have been, I would have confronted the problem directly. But at that point, I was trying to make the actor happy. He was very challenging, trying to make the writers happy and get what I knew they wanted. I was in over my head probably a bit. And that's one of the biggest memories I have was an actor creatively disagreeing with me, and the writing team and producers, because he had a very different idea than anyone else. And so how to deal with that on a set, how to truly support the actors, because I do always believe that that's one of the most important jobs is to bring out the best, most committed performances you can from an actor, you know. But at the same time, there's other agreements that I've made with the writers and the producers in terms of what I'm going to deliver to them. So I would have dealt with it differently, but at the time I was very, very flustered by it and didn't know what to make of it. I couldn't believe that the actor had stormed off set and, you know, spoken to me the way that he did. So that's my biggest memory. It ended up fine. You know, it ended up fine in the end. The actor and I both shook hands and, you know, water under the bridge, and sorry that happened, and we moved on. It was not a big deal, but and I was very happy with the episode, but that's my biggest memory of Salt Lake. My other memory was we shot in Ogden, I think, was the town that we used as the kind of main street.
Yeah, that's up north. Yeah, from
I didn't know Ogden before that. I knew Park City, I knew Salt Lake a little bit, but going up to Ogden, and what a picturesque and great little main street that was. It was
beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful little town, and I just love Utah. I love the mountains there. I love the air. The people are friendly. It's busy but not too busy. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
We appreciate that, and you're welcome back anytime. We've got a convention that runs at least once a year, so I know the guy.
Yeah,
I'll talk to him for you.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love it.
Now, Chuck was one of my favorite TV shows when it was on.
Yeah,
funny, action-packed, and you directed a bunch of those. What was that set like? All those fun actors.
It was a lot of fun. It was silly, very silly, that's for sure. We had a lot of laughs. So mostly what I do these days, and I've done for the last 10 or 15 years or so, is direct and produce. So I tend to, I don't direct as many shows as some other directors, like, you know, Roxanne, for example, has gone on to direct a lot of really fabulous episodes, and she's produced a couple of times actually as well. But I've kind of made the focus of my work producing. So I stay with the show. I'll help get it started. And the kind of producing that I do is working with the writers and then the production staff and budgets to kind of say, all right, the writer wants, this is what's important to the writer and the creator of the show. And I understand the production side. So here's some creative ways we can do that and stay within budget and do it with the resources that we have, or here's a way to make this even better than the writer may have imagined, is we can amp this up a little bit. We can, for example, last year I directed the show called The Resident, a medical show, and they had a request by the network that they wanted an action sequence in the episode because it was going to partner up with the mid-season premiere of 911, the action show. So they wanted to be able to promote double action episode. Well, The Resident is a medical show. They don't have action. The writers don't write action. That's not what they normally do. But because I've produced some action shows, they called me in and they said, hey, we'd like you to direct this episode. And if you have any ideas about how to make the action better, So I read it and I thought about it, and I came back with some really big ideas for a car chase and a car flip and explosion and a shootout in the building that precedes the car chase, and they bought it all. So I was able to, even just as a director, not even producing that show, I was able to sort of repitch some ideas and make what they wanted, an action sequence, even bigger than they had first imagined. And I produce usually. I produce Chuck. I came on to Chuck as a producer and directed probably one out of every 3 or 4 episodes I directed. I directed a lot of that show. It was fun. I love the comedy. Comedy's always been fun for me to work on, especially as a director. And I love the action. I love all the kind of mashup of genres that Chuck was. The romance, the action, the comedy, all of it was some of my favorite kind of entertainment. So,
Are you still in touch with anyone from the cast?
yeah. I talked to quite a few of them. I was just texting with Zach yesterday or today, this morning even, maybe. I've stayed in touch with Zach quite a bit. See him whenever I can. He lives in Texas. I live in Georgia now, but whenever we're in the same city, we try to connect. I stay in touch with Yvonne. I've seen her quite a few times, and
she's amazing in Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, she's wonderful. She's I had seen her do a Broadway show. She, right after Chuck, she got offered Golden Boy on Broadway, a revival of an old 1930s Clifford Odets play. And she was very intimidated to do it and very excited about it. And she did it, and I went to see her in it. I was directing and producing a show in New York at the time called 666 Park Avenue. But I went to see Yvonne in this piece, and she blew me away. I had no idea of the kind of talent and the acting chops and the kind of transformative abilities that Yvonne had as an actor to take on a whole new persona, and it was so much more than I ever expected. And I knew at that point when I saw her in that play that she was a more serious actor than I knew she was good, but she was really, really talented. So yeah.
When at the beginning of Handmaid's Tale, it's like, okay, I see what they're doing here, but when her arc ramped up and she knocked it out of the park all the time.
Yeah, she did.
Now, from going to good acting to kind of cheesy 80s movies, Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
Do you get asked about this movie often in interviews like this?
It's kind of come back the last few years. It's come back into vogue or something. I've gotten a lot of questions the last few years about Masters of the Universe. I wish they would, make another one, and I'd love to direct it. I'd love to help create a new. I know there's a lot of big movie directors and people that grew up as fans of the original Masters movie. So I'm sure at some point it will reemerge, but I had a blast doing it. Up until that point, I had been a New York theater actor. I'd done a lot of theater in New York. That's what I thought I was going to do for my life career was be a theater actor. And then just a year or so before that movie, I got a soap opera in New York. So I was on my first TV show. I was doing a daytime soap opera, and then I got offered this movie. So I was just thrilled. It felt like everything and more than I could have imagined was happening for me. And I was only 20 years old. I was a kid. I had done a play off Broadway that year while I was on the soap in New York, doing the TV show during the day, and then getting a movie. I just felt like I said, like all my dreams were coming true. I was very excited, and the cast was really exciting to me. Billy Barty playing Gwildor, who had been in the Wizard of Oz movie. It's just like, I can't believe I'm working with an actor like that. Frank Langella I was a huge fan of his theater work, and Meg Foster. I knew her very well. John SyFy had a great reputation as a theater actor and real professional. And Courtney Cox had been in the Bruce Springsteen video and was this young actress on a TV show called Misfits of Science that was very cool and edgy. So I was excited. I was thrilled. It was exciting. I think the thing that was challenging about that movie was we had a first time director, first and last. He directed his first and last movie, Gary Goddard. And I like Gary a lot personally. He was a sweet man and he really got the movie financed and kind of was spearheading it in many ways. But I wish that maybe someone else could have had a shot at directing the movie, because it was a lot for Gary to take on, not having ever directed and not knowing just the fundamentals and the nuts and bolts of getting through a day. And so all kinds of things just would fall apart. And they had problems with our crew, and our director of photography was fired and replaced. And there was a lot of behind the scenes budget problems and all kinds of things, scheduling nightmares. And but it was fun. I was 20, like I said. I was a kid. I was a baby.
Well, with all those problems, it sounds like it came out pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I think it could have. I think the vision of what we all hoped we were making and thought we might make was maybe not as campy and silly as it turned out. As once we got to see how it was photographed and edited and all the elements, we sort of realized, oh, it's just a campy, silly. It's not Star Wars. It's not E.T. It's not nearly as polished and kind of elevated as some of those movies that I think we were all sort of trying to aspire to in some ways. Anyway, but I had a great time making it.
It was one of my funner favorite 80s movies.
Yeah.
Have you seen the honest trailer for it? I think they released it recently. Yeah, it's they can be a little brutal with them, but they had fun with it. I'll
have to check that out. Yeah.
Before we jump into the bonus questions, I just want to touch back to kind of like the state of the Star Trek universe right now.
Yeah.
It's about you said it's like the 25th anniversary of Voyager. Is there anything you want to say about Voyager, just overall, to people?
Well, I think, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, I think Voyager was much more cutting edge than we all realized at the time. A female captain, first female captain, a co-female lead in many ways in 7 of 9, who, even though she came on the show a few years into the series, became critical in terms of kind of the point of view and the voice of the show, the series. I feel like it was cutting edge. It was very cutting edge, and it was ahead of its time. And I don't think that was quite realized by a lot of the fans and a lot of the people at the time. At the time, there was a lot of comparing it to Next Generation and Patrick Stewart, or there was a lot of like, well, it's not this or it's not that, rather than just kind of taking Voyager for what it actually was. And I think people are starting to see that now, I guess, with a little distance in time. I think there's a lot of people that are discovering Voyager as their first Star Trek show. They're finding it on Netflix or somewhere and really able to experience how cutting edge it was for its time and how strong the characters and the stories and the writing and the execution was. It was I'm really proud of the show, and I think that I'm glad that it's getting appreciated now later in its vintage.
Have you been able to catch any of Picard or Discovery?
I've seen Discovery. I haven't seen Picard yet. I've been sort of, because I don't want to get it started while I've got other things going. So I'm deep into a long list of shows trying to keep up with. But I'm dying to see Picard. I hear it's wonderful. And Discovery's been very hit or miss for me personally, as a series. But there's been some wonderful work on it. And again, like, female leading character, gay characters. It's breaking ground in so many ways, and in a lot of ways, things that Voyager had touched on or done or dealt with many years ago. So it's interesting to see kind of it's a newer version of things that we've done before. So.
And they're announcing more series, an animated series, the Strange New Worlds. Where would you like to see Star Trek go with these new interpretations?
Where would I like to see it go? Well, I think it's important for Star Trek to remember its history, and this isn't just because I was on the show, but I think that it's important for Star Trek to remember where it came from, and I think Strange New Worlds is a great way of exploring that. I think there was a realization with Discovery that you can't just dive into some brand new kind of format and characters and abandon all connection to the mythology of the entire series and the canon of the show. So going backwards to bring Picard into into a modern version, updated version, revisiting Picard, I think was the first step in that. Strange New Worlds is connecting the original series and that mythology in so many ways. I think there's a lot of value still in some of these other shows like Voyager or Deep Space Nine to contribute to that tapestry. And I'd love to see a way that they could bring back some of these characters. They had contacted me last year about coming on to Picard, actually, and I was not able to do it because I was producing. Like I said, I get on these shows as a producer full time, and so I couldn't do it. But that was that would have been fun. But I'd like to see these characters. I'd like to see the Doctor brought back into this tapestry and included in some of these versions, or some of my other castmates. Kate Mulgrew is a phenomenal captain, and I'd love to see her character and her as an actress given an opportunity to explore her stories a little deeper as well.
Yeah, I agree. There should be a Janeway series.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, bonus question time. The first one is, what does creativity mean to you?
Creativity means something that's authentic and personal. You can be creative in how you wash the dishes, if it's authentic and it's personal. I think if you're painting a painting or writing a song or acting in a scene or whatever, the creativity isn't copying what someone else did and trying to imitate another actor or another songwriter. Creativity is not pretending to write about something you don't know. Creativity to me is something that's authentic, and it's writing or creating from a place that is very personal to you and authentic, and finding a new perspective on that through the song or the painting or the scene that you do, or finding a deeper experience about the thing that you're connecting to in a very personal way. So that's creativity to me.
I like that. Who is your favorite Muppet and why? So it's any Jim Henson, Sesame Street, Yoda, Dark Crystal, Fraggles.
Okay. I think Grover I would say was my favorite Muppet. He just always seemed optimistic.
Yeah,
He
totally.
seemed very optimistic and enthusiastic, and he threw himself into things 100%. So I liked Grover.
My wife does an incredible Grover impression.
Oh, nice. Nice.
It's lots of fun. And then the last one, uh, whenever I ask actors this,
Yes.
I think it's a weird question. In the movie of your life, who would you want to play you?
Movie of my life. Who would I want to play me? I would like Paul Newman to play me. Like a young Paul Newman. Like
Yeah,
if we could go back in time a little bit, a younger Paul Newman.
I
Yeah.
could see that.
Yeah. I think that would be very interesting to me. Yeah.
Very,
Okay. I'll go with Paul Newman.
very nice. So if people want to catch your stuff that you're working on now or just you in general, where can they find you?
Well, I've got a Twitter. I don't know what my Twitter thing is. I think it's Robbie McNeill or McNeill Robbie, or I don't know. I got some Twitter. I got an Instagram. They can check out stuff there. We've got this web show and podcast, the Delta Flyers. It's on Patreon for people that want to check out the web show. And in terms of projects I'm working on, I have two jobs right now, but neither one of them are happening. I'm finishing up a series called Resident Alien that's going to air on SyFy Channel. I was producing that show. We did 10 episodes for SyFy Channel, almost finished. I have to direct the finale. We were just about to start shooting the finale when we got shut down. Resident Alien stars Alan Tudyk
Oh,
from
nice.
Firefly, and an amazing cast. It's kind of about an alien that gets stranded in a small town, kind of like Northern Exposure, and he has to take on a human form and pretend he gets drafted to be the town doctor. So he's got to pretend to be a doctor and be human while he figures out how to get home. And it's very funny. It's very well acted and well written. And Resident Alien is an awesome show. I think we're premiering in the fall. We hope on. We're supposed to premiere this summer, but it's pushed to the fall because of this COVID-19. We'll see if we can get everything finished up and ready to start airing in the fall. Resident Alien, and the other show that has not begun yet, but I've begun prepping it to produce, is Turner and Hooch for Disney Plus.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a TV, not an adaptation. It's a continuing story in the Turner and Hooch, inspired by the movie and related to the movie. His son is carrying on the law enforcement tradition. Tom Hanks's son, and a dog gets involved in his life, and we have a lot of familiar antics with a dog in Turner and Hooch, the series for Disney Plus. So that'll be coming out. I don't know when. We haven't started filming it yet, but yeah, it's reunited with Mick G, who I worked with on Chuck. Mick G's directing the pilot and producing the show, and I'm producing and directing episodes of it, and also with Matt Nix, who created The Gifted that I produced on Fox, the X-Men show.
Oh, nice.
I'm working with Matt Nix. He also created Burn Notice, a lot of people know. Yeah, it's exciting. A lot of things happening, and I'm people can find me everywhere.
Well, anytime you want to come back and talk about these projects when they're closer to premiering, you're welcome to.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Thank you for your
Nice
time.
chatting with you, Dylan. All right. You take
Live
care.
long and prosper. Have a good one. Have a good night, sir. Thank you.